The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Mike, it's not too often that we have someone on and I immediately want to buy their product and use it instantly. But the way Dom Kwong, COO and co-founder of Damon Motors, talked about their all-electric street bikes, I can't help but be a bike enthusiast now after the episode. What did you think?
Well, same. I mean, you know how impressionable I am with new products, or after I read a book, I sometimes adopt the personality of whoever I was reading about. But yeah, I couldn't help but think when he's kind of talking about, I think the technology and the safety features is like this, in my mind, I'm rationalizing, like, how do I then have this conversation with Chantel about like, how can I, pre-order one of these bikes and why it makes sense. Although the one thing I will say that, when he talked about how he made the compromise, with his wife, and he gave up bikes for 15 years because his daughters came along. I still have two very young daughters. So I think, if maybe this is probably a long-term play for me. But honestly, yeah, it was just really, I think, especially as like even guys like us, I think as you've already mentioned, that we're not bike enthusiasts. We've never had a motorcycle, but when you think about the technology and what they've been able to do and put that all into that bike. And then I think, from the perspective of the how all electric is a pillar of theirs, and kind of removing that dependence on gas and other energy like that. Like, I think that's just so appealing, especially to our age group right now, especially in the context of gas prices going up. So it's hard not to kind of hear his pitch and what the company's doing and not want to jump in with both feet.
No, that's for sure. And I should stress to everyone, we often do a little bit of a giveaway of the products that we talk about. I can assure everyone we will not be giving away a Damon Motors motorcycle this week. The old podcast hasn't broken even yet.
or yeah, no, it hasn't broke. It's just broken. But
yeah, exactly.
No, but I think what we'll do is, because we did have a really great chat with Dom. He had a lot of great things to say. And I think a lot of stuff that, you and I, did our homework going into it, but I think we definitely learned a lot from him. And I just can't help but think that I think, given the importance of BEVs worldwide right now, I think even, this is, these motorcycles aren't obviously applicable to the sectors that we work in and a lot of our listeners work in, but I think still it'll resonate. Very cool technology. So let's just maybe go right now to our conversation with Dom Kwong. So we're now pleased to be joined by Dom Kwong, who is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Damon Motors, a technology commercialization professional with more than 2 decades of experience. Dom has worked with both startups and large-scale companies developing products from concept to full commercialization. Prior to founding Damon, Dom served as head of engineering and manufacturing at Recon Instruments, which was acquired by Intel for $150 million, where he led development and manufacturing of Recon Snow 2 HUD goggles. Dom prefers track riding to street riding and uses the experience to deliver the best riding experience for hypersport riders. He has taken more than 20 advanced riding courses and an advocate for rider safety. And 15 years ago, Dom's dream of bringing the safest motorcycle to the streets began. Teaming up with Jay Giroux, put his dreams on course. The duo would go on to create Damon Motors. So Dom, thanks so much for being here. I know we started talking offline about all your duties at Damon under your portfolio, and we'll get to that. But I think before we start talking about Damon, I kind of talked a little about your career stops in that bio, but if you can maybe talk about your journey in your own words, before the founding of Damon, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate this. I don't, like I said, I don't get let out of my cage that often. When I do, some intelligent things come out of this mouth. Yeah. So you know what? I'm a product of Asian immigrants to Canada. I am a first generation Asian Canadian, and very proud of that. Born and raised in Vancouver, BC. And quite frankly, lived a very, sheltered and typical Asian life. And, when it came time to choose my career, I only had 4 choices available to me. There was accountant, engineer, lawyer, doctor. So choose. Funny enough, I didn't want any of them. I wanted to be an artist at first. I wanted to be in print advertising. I realized I can draw and I like to create, but at the same time, I also loved cinema, and that was, and on audio, and so that kind of had the electronics kick to it. So ultimately, as a young 17-year-old, and the guidance counselor comes to you and goes, you know what, there's no money in art. Go to electronics. I can't falter for that because my career I've just been really lucky. So I started my career in 97. I'm a radio engineer, actually, when I went to college. And so I was fortunate enough to join a company called Sierra Wireless, designing the world's first wireless data modem before the age of the internet and before high-speed data. And so as a radio engineer, that was a really, first of all, the niche expertise. And that I was fortunate that Sierra hired me because that's what they do. And, nowadays, it's unfortunate, but there's just so many students now that train under one discipline, what they want. And unfortunately, the job market is so fierce that they end up switching roles, switching careers, and they never end up doing what they were trained to do. And so being able to do just that, doing my radio work, was awesome. I mean, I worked at Sierra for 12 years, and when I left the company, I joined a few ex-colleagues of mine, to build or form a consulting company. And we did that for about 5 years. And, I worked with companies such as Apple, Philips Lighting, Kensington Computer Products, just doing a lot of different things, from iPod accessories to solid state lighting for museums, to heads-up display systems, funny enough. And one of those companies, as you mentioned before, was Recon Instruments. So when I left consulting, Recon pinged me and asked me if I would join them as their director of manufacturing and engineering. And, I chomped at the bit. I'm like, first of all, this technology is pretty cool. Like, you have a ski goggle that has a heads-up display system inside of it. Imagine that, right? You can now know how fast you're bombing down the mountain. For most people, they try to up their game and go faster. For me, it was the opposite effect. I went slower and slower because I knew that, falling down at 20 miles an hour or more hurt a lot, right? So anyways, I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then, as you mentioned, Intel came around. Big supporter, wanted to diversify their portfolio, get into consumer electronics, and boom, they buy Recon. And so I started working for Intel. Worked out of their Santa Clara office. I was actually flying back to and from Vancouver to Santa Clara every week. I would spend 4 days at home, that's including the weekend, and 3 days in Santa Clara for 10 months straight.
Quite the commute.
It is. I mean, eventually you get into a routine. But ultimately, the greatest compliment to me from Intel was, we love you. You got to move down. And I said, your timing really sucked. My kids, I have 2 daughters, and they were, 10 and 9 at the time. And it's like, I'm not going to root them. I'm sorry. I absolutely am so sorry. But you know what? One opportunity kind of fades away and a new one comes about, because shortly thereafter, I met Jay Giroux, my business partner and co-founder. And we had the mission to make motorcycles safer. We are both motorcyclists. We have been since '98, and we love all things about motorcycles. With my technology background, I mean, I've done everything from, of course, street riding to racing to wrenching. Because you had to, especially when you're a young guy and taking up a really expensive hobby like motorcycle racing. And when you crash, it's not like I have a pit crew that can build my bike again. I have to do it myself, right? And so we wanted to make motorcycling safer, because we wanted to ensure that our riders, our brethren, riders of today, riders of tomorrow, and riders of yesterday, all had a platform, all had can continue to experience the joy of motorcycling each and every day and return home to their families and just spread the love and spread the joy. And so that's still a pillar of Damon, is safety. The other 2 pillars of Damon is electrification. We want the world off gas, period, hands down. Okay. Look at today with gas prices, where they are now. Electric vehicles are selling like hotcakes. And we need energy independence, all of us, right? Not only from from a national point of view, but also from like an individual point of view. I mean, I can get into some of the features of a Damon motorcycle, but in this case here, I mean, a Damon Hypersport with its 20 kilowatt hour battery pack, it can actually feed energy back into the grid, meaning that it can power your home for 3 days, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good good segue into what I was really interested in too. Mike and I were sort of when we were thinking about what we'd want to ask you, if you think about the motorcycle as a platform,
Yeah.
pretty much the raw elements are unchanged for a couple hundred years, right? Since the 1880s. Can you talk about some of the innovations that Damon has brought to bear with the Hypersport that you mentioned, and also the Hyperfighter models? What's changed? I know it still has 2 wheels, but what else do we have going on in there?
Yeah, I mean, a motorcycle is still a motorcycle, but a Damon motorcycle enhances your experience. And number one, as I mentioned before, the safety aspect is the biggest piece by far. The safety one is basically it's called Copilot. And what Copilot is a 360-degree accident warning system for motorcyclists. If you take the first letter of those words, it spells awesome. And really what it is, it's taking commercially available commodity radars and cameras that you would find on any car, right? Where be it Camrys or Teslas. And with our software, it gives the rider a 360-degree awareness of their surroundings, and the system detects or looks for threats. It's capable of tracking objects, 64 objects at a time. And so what we've designed is a system that allows the rider to have, obviously the freedom of control, but it gives them the control of information. Because when the system detects a threat, right, it will alert that threat 2 ways to the rider. The first way is a visual system. So that we have a kind of a light bar that's on our dashboard that gives you like, a blind spot. It'll be an amber light on the left-hand side of the screen. If it's a blind spot right, opposite side on the right side. And then if there was a forward collision event, not only does the top of the light bar flash red, but you also have haptic feedback in the handlebar. It'll vibrate, letting you know that there's a forward collision event. So that is the key number one feature at Damon. The other one, which I would consider 1A and 1B, is what we call hyperdrive. Hyperdrive is the battery pack, motor, power electronics, the safety electronics, and the frame of the motorcycle all rolled into one. Why would we do something like that? Quite frankly, in order to have the range numbers that we're stating, the performance that we want, we needed to innovate. We needed to start with a blank piece of paper and go, you know what? In order to deliver this much like range, right, and have this much available power to feed the motor to give us 200 horsepower, right, 200 miles of range, and also to go 200 miles per hour top speed, we needed a full level integration. So, here's the X number of batteries that we needed to support the range figure. And you quickly realize that, hey, if we don't integrate more pieces of the bike together to operate, right? So like multi-function or multi-use pieces, then we're going to be compromising space, which then leads to having fewer batteries, having fewer, less space for everything else. And so, and on top of that, the aerodynamics, we're not able to shape the bike the way we need to if we don't take this holistic approach. And so that's the big one with hyperdrive. It allows us to not only, build this bike, but with a simple change of the headstock, which is what holds the forks and the swing arm, we can make different bikes off the same platform. So, my job as CEO, as on the manufacturing side, it makes my life a lot easier. I can build a single homogeneous product that then on the back end can be configured to any type of bike you can imagine, right? And it would take me no time to do that. I don't have to be waiting for a new motor to show up. I don't have to be waiting for a new battery pack to show up. The beauty of having this, one, a single platform lump plus enabling software allows me to do a lot of different things on this motorcycle. And then, the last thing, if I would call it the last thing, is that, our connectivity solution on this motorcycle, we have every wireless standard you can imagine, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular. Why would we do such a thing? Is because we know that we need to communicate, we need to gather data, number one, and we also need to be able to communicate to and from the rider and connect all the peripherals that riders want. So like our demographic, like our average age, our customer base is 37 years old. And what does that mean? They love their phones. they love their their peripherals, their gadgets, right? And so why not take that into account? I mean, this kind of like speaks really true to my background being a radio engineer. Especially in those early days of finding that killer feature to enable like high speed data, which was quite frankly surfing the web or emailing, right? So now that we have this connected vehicle solution, we can now gather information from the bike itself. How is it, what is it doing, right? We have GPS, so we know where it's going. We want to gather information of its surroundings. So it's not just weather, but also traffic conditions, right? Like, ultimately what we want to do is reverse engineer the cause of accidents. And then the last piece, which should be the first piece, is I'm gathering information about the rider. We developed an AI model to classify the type of rider that you are, whether you're a novice or experienced or passive or aggressive, wherever you sit on in that field, in that matrix, the bike will pull that information in. It will automatically adjust the alerts and the range detection based on your experience. So a novice rider may want, that alert to be more frequent than an experienced rider. A novice rider may want to have more advanced alerts than an experienced rider, right? So this is like with the Damon fleet of motorcycles. In my opinion, for the first time, you have a motorcycle that adapts to the rider, not the other way around.
That's incredible. There's so many like sci-fi sounding questions that I have in my head, like around how do you get batteries at a form factor that can fit to your constraints and all kinds of things. I'm sure we can talk about in a second, but
Sure.
that's way different than what you'd expect from a motorcycle, right? There's so much more added on. The same sort of, I bet you it looks like, the pictures I've seen, it looks like a high performance bike, but you have so much packed into there that differentiates it. I find that incredible, and really kudos to you to bring together those worlds, because you might have a boutique bike developer that doesn't include all those other things, right, from the high tech space. So you're sort of bringing together those two worlds, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, we have okay. I don't know how to say this without being flippant. I don't want to be disrespectful to the industry, right? But I'm saying that at Damon, we listen to our customers. We know who our customers are. We understand their behaviors. We understand what they want. We understand their everyday lives, right? And it's just that. It's delivering a product that makes sense for them. I mean, that goes without saying. It's kind of like business 101, right? But to be able to merge technology to be an enhancement as opposed to being distraction, and also to help kind of augment your experience, right? Like, again, fundamentally, we want riders to just enjoy themselves whatever they do, whether it be recreation, whether it be professional services or other. We want you coming home each and every single time. And so we're just giving you all the capabilities and mechanisms that technology allows today. We've had our safety system tested by LAPD, and they were flabbergasted that this technology exists in the world. I'm like, and I kind of I respected what their opinion. I respected where their perspective came from, because police officers, they're putting their lives on the line every single day, and they don't have time to explore the technology world that I get to explore, right? And so when I say, hey, look, this is stuff that's been around for decades. The question that we always get asked is, like, why isn't this stuff on more motorcycles?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's a fair question, and we're still asking it.
Steve and I are obviously, well, not obviously, but I guess it's probably pretty obvious that we're non motorcycle riders. But one of the things that we were first struck by when we were doing our homework on Damon was obviously in one of the videos we came across just how quiet it is, right? And again, this shouldn't be a surprise when you're dealing with electric motors and things like that. But you've already kind of touched on, the performance, the range you get, and the top speeds. But in terms of like the specs and how quiet it is, like, is this feedback you get often from people who are maybe kind of discovering it for the first time, that, wow, I can't believe you get this range, you still get this power, but it's whisper quiet?
Absolutely. It is. And I mean, it is and it isn't. It depends on the speed, right? It is still, this motorcycle is it has a chain drive. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you will still hear the chain running through the sprockets, and especially as it winds up, it sounds like a jet turbine. Okay. So it's moving at slow speed. Absolutely. There's very little sound. But when you're at speed, believe me, people can hear you. That goes without saying. And so I just to touch on that a bit further, we felt that at Damon, and you guys are kind of like, alluded to it, by the looks, by the performance, we are making, like, one of like key missions in Damon was to actually make a bike that was familiar. Like, in order to be the future of motorcycles, we have to be as good or better than the past. Right. And so if we judge ourselves by, say the present, right? What is the most powerful and crazy motorcycle available? It's probably the Ducati Panigale V4, which is a 1200cc fire breathing dragon, right? It has 210, 15 horsepower. It can go really fast, but it doesn't go very far, right? So there's always those trade-offs. And so for us, we felt that by building the Hypersport, we have to build something that feels familiar, yet has the new generation of technology that allows people that are like that come from the past, that are used to internal combustion engines, to transition over to electric. I mean, look, I'm not asking people to replace their beloved gas motorcycles. I have many. Jay has a ton. But we're just saying an electric can sit beside that gas bike and you will still love all of them, right? They all have their different quirks and they have their own different flavor, but that's what makes them awesome, what makes them unique. And for us, when we started the company, Jay and I, we said electric was the minimum bar. Why? Because first of all, this day and age, especially with the high degree of adoption of electric vehicles, if we didn't come up with an electric platform, then we would definitely be looked at as the past, right? Like the adoption rate would not be as high, regardless of whether we had put a safety system on it or not, right? There was some degree of compromise, and that was one thing that we didn't want to do. So that's kind of the ethos of how Damon looks at the technology and the future, and that this is like, we are building the first transitionary product, and then from there we can go further and more bold as far as looks, design, usages of the motorcycle, right? But you can't just come out of the gate with something that looks like it's coming out of like year 2250 or something like that, because like just by looks alone, I mean, everyone has an opinion about what the future is, right? So
for sure,
we kind of have to give ourselves time to get to that point where we can like learn to accept new ideas, right?
Yeah, and I want to linger on the sort of your core principle that you started with, being electric. So Mike and I we manage research that's mainly in the underground mining space. So
Yeah.
we're going a lot less fast, but they've been really adept at adopting electric vehicles as a means of, saving expenses on breathing air underground, because
Mhm.
it doesn't, there's no diesel particulate matter made or anything like that. Um, One of the things that some of our vehicle developers are sort of struggling with is supply chain
Yeah.
and finding reliable supply chain. To the extent that you've solved that, could you talk a bit about how you've overcome any hurdles in supply chain and getting components for your product?
Oh, I think we're still in it. Like,
Yeah,
it's still a struggle, and I think it's a global struggle, as everyone knows. And I think for us, what we've been able to do is, for our supply chain, is actually leverage a lot of relationships that was born from kind of the consumer electronics sector, and also, with many of our suppliers, we had to pitch, and we had to pitch hard,
Mm,
because first of all, we're a small company. We're an emerging brand. We've done a great job getting our names out there, getting notoriety, and getting press. But at the same time, a lot of say the larger suppliers, they just want some kind of history, right? Of course, there's finances to go along with it, but you know, how can you help bridge that gap when, even if you had the money, they don't know if you're a fly-by-night company. And also,
Mhm.
many of these companies have been burned by the past. So, you had a lot of electric motorcycle companies that were, actually a lot more today, like in the past, than you have today. They were the ones to kind of like, start the revolution, and these companies were all for it. They can see it, right? However, they were all burned by it, right? You had companies that were placing purchase orders for, tens of thousands of this item or that item, or this part or that part, only to renege or to change their scope dramatically. Like,
mhm.
some of them didn't even survive past a year or two. And so we had to overcome some of those biases, quite frankly. I mean, just to be able to get a conversation, right? Forget about the introduction, but go past that and say, hey, can we actually sit down and have a call to discuss the opportunity? That was very difficult, but we managed to do it. And in those first calls, we had to pitch the business. I'm brought in a lot, like together with my supply chain team, to help do that, right? To help build that, form that relationship, and say, hey, look, you know what? This is an exciting company. We are the future of motorcycles. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Hey, we have an order book. We've sold 2,100 vehicles so far. There's a book value of over $50 million, right? And so those are real orders. Those are credit card backed orders, and I can give you a list of names of who ordered them, and so that helps. That
Mhm.
helps to build that level of credibility. And again, it's like with any new relationship, it's about, okay, well, let me buy a handful of this product. Let me buy more and more and more. And you're establishing not only credit terms, but you're also building that relationship. One thing that COVID has taught us is that you have to be really good at doing that song and dance virtually, right? Like,
Yeah.
really good at it. Okay. And that's a technique. That's something that we had to learn and adapt. And that what makes Damon also unique. I mean, our marketing and advertising is strictly through social media, right? Just because of the COVID restrictions have prevented us from going out to the people, right? Now that things are, getting better, it just gives us another opportunity to just like kind of supercharge that, right? So we're getting back to your question about the suppliers. I'm now able to travel to them and visit them and have those, one-on-one conversations about, questions about the pitch. And also, it's great to be able to look someone in the eye and just, be really earnest and be really excited and passionate about what you're saying. And hopefully they don't smell bullshit, right? And luckily I don't smell like shit. So, it's worked out pretty well so far, right? And but again, we're the at the end of the day, orders is what matters, and that's what we're doing. right? Our customers have been absolutely tremendous to us. We can't thank them enough. And our mission right now is just, it's deliver, right?
Dom, I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier, though, because you'd mentioned, your prime demo are people who are 37 or they have their cell phones not far from them. So I'm going to be 37 in a few months.
Oh, God.
And my cell phone is always with me. We can have a whole conversation about how my wife thinks I'm on my phone too much, which I probably am. Always try to get better week to week, but it's still a struggle. But on that note, you'd mentioned earlier about the safety features. And I think, somebody like me who's 37, I want to be connected to my device. I think share your vision for, independence energy independence and getting off gas and adopting new technologies like BEVs. Yeah. But I still have to overcome, the safety hurdle that I think I would get in my house, despite the safety features you'd mentioned. There's always, I think, this conception around motorcycles being inherently dangerous. So in your experience, like going after people in our demo, who may not have even had a motorcycle, a gas one at that, like have the safety features that is, inherent part of the Damon line, has that been enough to sway folks who might have thought this is too dangerous for me? Maybe just some feedback there that I could bring home to my wife, Chantel.
Absolutely. First of all, tell Chantel, give her my number. Let me have a chance to talk to her. I've had many conversations with significant others. Believe me. I mean, yes, thank you for that. And the safety component does make a big difference. It absolutely does. Because one thing is that, look, whether you ride a motorcycle or you don't, I think everybody can respect, our mission to try to make people's lives, like basically safeguard people's lives and try to make this motorcycling safer, right? Because like you said before, motorcycles, when you talk about it, it's inherently unsafe. You don't have this protective cage, right? You're literally out in the elements, and then you're open for anything to happen to you. And so what I would say is that what I would say is to tell a story. I'll tell a story about a personal story about and my wife and I, when I got into motorcycling, I mean, she was my girlfriend at the time, and she didn't want to have me jump on a bike, but I was headstrong. I wanted to get on a bike and do a lot of cool things. And over time, when we got married, she said, look, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. I want you to give up the street, give up riding the street, but you can ride the track all you want. Okay? Because at the street, I don't trust other people. I trust you, but I don't trust other people. Fair enough. She knew I loved track riding. I took that bet. At the same time, she knew that we were both, really, really focused on having a family. And so when my daughter was born, I dropped everything. She was number one, right? And I left motorcycling for 15 years. I didn't come back to motorcycling until Jay and I met, to tell you the truth. Okay. And so I went to my wife and said, hey, that deal we had way back when? It's my job to ride motorcycles now.
Yeah.
And that's the truth, right? I'm not only do I have to buy motorcycles, I have to ride motorcycles. And guess where I have to ride them? On the street, right? And she was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And she was fierce. And I said, look, I'm going to put Damon's safety system on these bikes. It went from like strong no to maybe. That's a win. That's a win, right? And she kind of like was thinking about that. Like she knew, based on her experiences on a car with these safety systems like forward collision and blind spot, how helpful it is to her as a driver. And the fact that we're going to put this on a motorcycle now. All right. All right. Maybe. And now the most unbelievable or really cool, believable thing. Like I have a gas motorcycle. I have a Ducati XDLV, which is a cruiser. We go riding together, right? Amazing. From strong no to now enjoying this sport that I love together. All because of the fact that Damon has this mission of safety. Right, that we were going to take things, we're going to do our damnness to basically improve riders' lives, right? So no, that's hopefully that answers the question. But
Yeah, I think I should buy her a bike, and then that's my way. And I think, ultimately having it as part of your job, I think is probably also helpful, right? It'd be very difficult, I think, to be a COO of a motorcycle company and not ride, right? So again, maybe that was a thin edge of the wedge to get back in. So
Yeah, I think there might be some daylight there that you can start to work on, Mike. Now the thing is, we're in like a northern community, and
yeah,
I think our potholes are too bad. Hopefully, you can come with a pothole avoidance system, Dom, and maybe it would be a bit more
it would be
palatable.
it'd be working overdrive in Sudbury, that's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, of course, when Mike and I were researching for having you on, really slick videos you have of the bike
Mhm.
on YouTube, and it almost I don't want to say sells itself, because I'm sure, as a salesperson, you know that that's not the case. But you said that primarily your mode of marketing has been through social media. Could you talk a bit more about that, and like how this differs from what you'd expect from a typical marketing, a motorcycle marketing campaign sort of strategy?
It's very simply engagement. Okay, we don't just put videos out there,
Hmm.
right? That's of course part of our sharing our vision, but it's about answering questions, about answering our public when asked. And so I mean, it like any question is asked of Damon on any platform you can imagine, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. We answer within an hour.
Wow.
And each answer is personalized. It's not a chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That is how we win, right? We don't just, throw a bunch of stuff out there and just stay silent. We have to promote, and the way we promote is actually through the eyes, the hearts, and the mouths of other people, right? It's actually other motorcyclists, because motorcyclists, in North America, actually around the world, motorcyclists are extremely passionate people. They love the sport, they love the technology, they love like getting out in groups, and the whole social aspect of it is quite endearing. And so we celebrate that. We celebrate that fully. We have a full engagement. So we even have our own Damon Lab, which is a message board, whereby our customers are non-customers. They can go into the lab and ask us anything, and we will answer. I will answer a lot of the questions myself, and my team does the same thing. And there's kind of like no holds barred as far as like what kind of questions. I mean, sometimes what we'll do is we'll engage with the lab and go, hey, we have this concept that we're thinking right now. We would love your feedback. We throw it out there. Tell us, if you like A or like B, and tell us why. And that gives us an incredible amount of insight into, our assumptions, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, yes, at Damon, we are motorcyclists, and I'm not, no lie. If you weren't a motorcyclist before you came over to Damon to work, you are now one. Because we pay for the training.
Yeah.
We pay for the training. So motorcyclists develop motorcycle technology, but you know what? We don't want to do things in a bubble, right? We want to make sure that, our customers, our public, have an opportunity to be involved, right? We give, like, actually, to kind of round out my answer to your question, we give them access to the inner workings of Damon, how this design process works that no other company does, other than show them a video, give them a snippet of what's happening, but there's no feedback,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, it's almost like you're taking what you see, like, popularized in sort of the sort of app, sort of Silicon Valley type tech startups. That instant feedback and validation doesn't usually go in with like motorsports, right? It's usually more of a consumer product,
Yeah.
that's like app based or something like that. So you're taking that concept and a really devoted client group that really likes their product, and you're getting that passion back into your design philosophy,
Yep,
right? Yeah, that's
exactly.
incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's tried and true. We talk to Apple,
Yeah, for sure.
right? You talk to like Facebook. I mean, yeah, that's a bit old, but you get what I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's almost, you're taking this some software companies, and like I said, consumer electronics companies, and take their technique and approach, apply it to automotive, which is it's a respected industry, but it's kind of like an old world industry as well, and it needs to grow.
Dom, one of the things we wanted to ask you as well is, obviously you've mentioned how, passionate motorcyclists are, and, how when it comes, you guys, you're looking to, obviously, ditch energy dependence and kind of go to electric, but obviously you're not, you not necessarily wanting people to get rid of their gas bikes. And you mentioned how, you and your co-founder still have theirs, but in terms of, how the hyperdrive technology can pretty much go into any configuration, like, do you think you'll be able to get like Harley enthusiasts to like ditch those bikes and adopt like a Harley electric bike? Is that something that's in the future? Is that even part of your approach?
Yes.
Okay.
Quite simply.
Yeah.
Whether it's our bike or other bikes, I mean, I think we can inspire. I think, Harley Davidson riders, I get them for the most part, like, the passion behind the sport, which is unbelievable. It's incredible how much brand loyalty Harley has. With electric, I guess, like I said before, it's kind of it needs to be a transitionary product, like what we built, just to highlight that, well, how can we relate, specifications or performance figures of the past to what's in the future? Like we kind of have to speak on that level, right? So, okay, hey, horsepower. Well, how much horsepower do you have? We have 200 horsepower. Oh, wow. Right. How fast can it go? 200 miles an hour. Whoa. Okay. And then, but the thing is, like, what's not talked about that much is like torque, right?
Yeah.
How much torque does it have? I mean, most bikes have like 80 foot-pounds of torque. This one has like, 80, 100, 120 foot-pounds of torque. It can rock it. And that's the thing is like, you get that level of torque, at 0 RPM all the way through, most of its rev range, right? And so it just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling. And so I would say that, in some ways, it's the nuances of riding electric that it needs to be felt, right, than necessarily told, because a lot of people can be skeptical about that, right? I mean, I can probably describe it quite well, but until you actually experience it, it's hard to relate. Like, for example, an electric vehicle riding at slow speed, well, if you're in a internal combustion engine car or a motorcycle, sorry, you're worried about not stalling the engine, because you have to feather the clutch while feeding in the gas, and it's a very fine balance. And especially when you're moving at slow speed, you're also, if you're short, you're worried about having the bike tip over as well, right? And so when you have to maneuver at those speeds, it becomes it's such a juggling act. With electric, because there's no transmission per se, right? I can just turn the throttle, and the thing is I can just turn the throttle a small percentage, and the bike will just walk. It will move as fast as you want it to be, right? So at walking pace all the way to 200 miles an hour, it's up to you. It's how fast and how aggressive you want to be with that throttle. It can literally deliver whatever you want. And so, there's things like, you mentioned before, the noise. I mean, those are things that we have to, overcome, as far as that perception is a perception, trying to overcome certain perception. But I think, honestly, when people experience it and understand, like, there's like, they're the same but different, and you have to appreciate their differences, without disrespecting their differences. I think that's where you can, bridge the gap.
That's great. So we're coming to the end of our time, Dom, and thanks so much for spending time with us. It's been actually truly inspirational, because every time Mike and I have, high tech entrepreneurs on, we learn so much, and then Mike and I want to go out and buy the product.
Yeah.
But and that's certainly the case this week as well. But I wanted to know from you, to the extent you can tell us, what's next for Damon. One thing that we do have a lot in Sudbury, because we're generally like a rural area, is a lot of dirt biking, a lot of ATVs, a lot of side-by-sides. Do you see growing in to that area more, or are there a bunch of areas on your sort of vision board that you're going to grow into?
There is a number of areas. I mean, we are we see a lot of different opportunities with different motorcycles. Dirt bikes is definitely one of those things that we are looking at. My CTO Derek Dorstein would absolutely shoot me if we don't, because he used to be the founder and CTO for Alta Motorcycles that made electric dirt bikes, and so he's a professional dirt racer as well. And so no, it's like we want to produce the right bike for markets around the world. We're not here, stuck in North America. We're looking at a global platform. And so, what's next for us? First of all, deliver motorcycles. So we're on track to deliver the Hypersport in 22. We are currently building our factory, our 110,000 square foot facility here in Surrey, BC. And we're very, very thankful to the city of Surrey and our partner BOSA Group for doing that. And we're just ramping up, finishing our R&D, ramping up on production. That's what we're looking at. And then, of course, we launched the Hyper Fighter at CES earlier this year, and we expect that to be shipping in mid to late 23. And then working on the next vehicle on the same hyperdrive platform and developing a new platform for the rest of the world. Yeah,
that's great.
Really busy.
Yeah. No, exactly. Mike and I are going to actually be in Vancouver in early May.
I
was going to say.
Over. Yeah, definitely. Come on over. Come see the shop.
Absolutely. That'd be
awesome. Maybe we could shoot some video and then we can have like a bit of a web feature too. That'd be sweet.
Why not? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's great. Dom Kwong from Damon Motors, thanks so much for spending some time with us. And can't wait to see what's next. And maybe Mike and I will tour the facility when we're out there in May.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Appreciate it.
Take
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We are back. That was a great conversation with Dom. The one thing I left out from him that I could share now is I remember, that I have a lot of Lego kits in my office. There's actually, there are probably some in your office. There's some in Pat's office.
Yeah, your offsite gallery.
Yeah. So I think one of the sets that I do have is a Harley Davidson Lego kit. And I remember when I first brought it to Cambrian, because I'm not allowed to keep any of this in my house, I put it down on the pavement in front of our building. I took a picture of it. And I think my Instagram caption was probably along the lines of like, this is as close as I'll ever get to a motorcycle. But I think I'm a little bit more closer today after having chatted with Dom, right? I think I've got the gears are turning, so to speak.
Yeah. I drove dirt bikes when I was a kid, of course, growing up in the wilderness of Esther, Ontario. We drove mini bikes first and then dirt bikes. And that was always fun, but boy, when you think you're bulletproof, you're really taking a lot of risks. I think what was really impactful for me is just how many safety technologies go into a Damon Motors motorcycle, and that for a lot of people might be the difference, right? Especially with worried loved ones at home. That might be what does it, and it'll lead to a lot of adoption, I think, for the company. No, but great chat. I love the you could always see where those sort of technology fields converge, having worked at Intel before and worked in tech, and then merging that with the sort of legacy sector, as he put it, of motorsports. You could see how a really cool product comes out the other end. And I really want to take him up on the offer to have a tour, and maybe we could shoot a little video when we get out there and maybe release that video as well.
It'll get us just that much closer to a real motorcycle. But I think we could have talked to him much longer, because there's a whole sorts of other things that I think from a business perspective is really interesting. Because when we were offline before we started, he talked about how he has to wear so many hats as a COO, right? So now you've got a manufacturing plant that they're developing in Surrey. So what's that going to be like? He's talking about now we've got to fulfill the orders that we've had and bring these products to market, this year and the following year, right? So there's all sorts of, I think, interesting things that that he's had to experience along the way, not only just from the technology side, but I think now all of the other things that he has to do operationally, that I think our listeners would still appreciate. The one thing that I did pick up on that I wanted to share that I thought was cool was just how he mentioned his early career as a radio engineer, and how that still kind of came back, even though he was in a completely different field. When you hear about all the tech that they have in their bikes, that he was still able to take, what he was doing early on as a radio engineer. And it's now obviously a key feature of how they keep their riders connected and how they, interface with those systems.
Well, yeah, and even like what he did with Recon before the heads-up display. Of course, there's a slick heads-up display in the new Hypersport, right? So it's cool how a career makes your sort of a career makes the product essentially
Mm-hmm.
when you get into a leadership perspective like that. So great chat. Hope to have more like this, and really hope to see the facility when we head out there in May.
All right. Well, I guess this has been another episode of
The Unlikely Innovators. See you guys next time.
Cheers.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.